I want you to imagine this. Your only son, the boy you raised with your own 2 hands, the one you carried on your shoulders when he was little, looks you dead in the eyes and says, "Dad, this house isn't yours anymore. It's theirs now. You're not welcome here." That's exactly what my son said to me, my son, Ethan. In that moment, I should have broken down. I should have shouted, begged, or even cried, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at him, and I did something he didn't expect. I smiled, I nodded, and I said, "All right, son." But deep inside, my heart was tearing apart. You see, this wasn't just any house, it was my villa by the lake, the one I built after decades of backbreaking work running a small construction company. Every brick, every tile, every polished piece of wood inside that home was a reminder of my sweat, my wife's love, and the life we tried to build together. That villa wasn't just a house, it was my soul. And now my own son was giving it away like it was nothing. Let me tell you about the people he gave it to. My daughter-in-law, Lydia, is a sharp woman. Some might say too sharp for her own good. She has always looked at me as if I were an obstacle in her path, a man too old-fashioned, too stubborn, and too unwilling to bend to her will. She never said it out loud, but I could feel it in the way she smiled when Ethan distanced himself from me, in the way she pushed her family closer into his life while mine was pushed further out. Her parents, Charles and Margaret, were no better. They saw my villa not as a home, but as a prize to be claimed. I could see it in their eyes whenever they visited, that greedy glimmer as they looked around the wide living room, the tall glass windows that framed the lake, the grand oak staircase I had polished myself. They wanted it, and now Ethan was handing it over to them as if it were his right to give. Standing there in front of me, Ethan looked nothing like the boy I had raised. His jaw was tight, his voice flat, his eyes cold. "Dad," he said firmly, "this is what's best. Lydia's family needs this place, you'll be fine, but you can't come back here anymore. Do you know what it feels like when your own child tells you that you're no longer welcome in the home you built for them? It's not anger, not at first. It's an emptiness so heavy it makes your chest ache. It's betrayal so sharp it slices through your bones. But here's the strange part. Instead of shouting, I felt calm. Calm in a way that scared me. I took a deep breath, nodded slowly, and replied, "All right, son. If that's how you see it." The corner of Lydia's mouth curled upward ever so slightly. She thought she had won. She thought I was defeated. Ethan didn't even look at me again. He just turned away, as if the conversation were over, as if I were already gone from his life. But I wasn't gone, not yet, because while they thought they had taken everything from me, they didn't know that I had one thing left, something they could never touch. My dignity, and my dignity was stronger than their greed. So I smiled. I smiled the kind of smile that comes not from joy, but from resolve. Because even as I stood there, agreeing to my son's betrayal, I was already making a decision. I was already planning what to do next. When they came to move in, when they arrived at the gates of my villa with their boxes and suitcases, ready to claim what they thought was theirs, I would be ready for them. And the surprise I had in store would be something they would never forget. That day, they thought they had stolen my home. But what they didn't realize was that I had already set the stage for the lesson of a lifetime. Before I tell you what happened the day my son gave away my villa, you need to understand what that house meant to me. My name is Henry Marshall. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent most of my life with a hammer in one hand and a blueprint in the other. I started out as a construction worker, the guy who did the jobs nobody else wanted. The digging, the hauling, the endless nights spent finishing a job on time. Eventually, I saved enough money to start my own small company. It was never glamorous, but it was honest work, and over the years it put food on the table, clothes on my son's back, and finally the home I had always dreamed of building. That home, my villa by the lake, wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. It was the proof that every long night, every blister on my hands, Every sacrifice I made was worth it. I still remember the first day I walked through the finished house with my late wife, Emily. Her eyes shined as she touched the walls. She ran her fingers over the oak banister and whispered, "Henry, this isn't just a house. This is our story carved into wood and stone." She was right. For years, that villa was filled with laughter. Emily loved tending the flower beds out front, while I spent weekends building a deck by the water. Ethan, my boy, would run down the hill into the lake with his friends every summer, their laughter echoing across the water. Those were the best days of my life. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. Emily passed away 10 years ago after a short illness, and when she left, the house grew quiet, too quiet. I'd walk through the rooms and hear nothing but the creak of the wood and the echo of my own footsteps. Sometimes I'd sit in her favorite chair just to feel close to her again. That villa became more than a home then. It became the last living piece of her I had. Ethan was all I had left of our family, and for a while he was my anchor. After Emily's funeral, he promised me, "Dad, we'll get through this. I'll take care of you." And for a time, he did. But as he grew older, got married, and built his own life, I began to see him less and less. When he met Lydia, I tried my best to welcome her. She was smart, ambitious, and had a strong personality, maybe too strong. She never outright disrespected me, but I always felt that she didn't want me too close to their lives. She was polite when Ethan was around, but when it was just the two of us, her smiles were cold, her words clipped. Still, I told myself, she's his choice. If she makes him happy, I'll accept her. That's what fathers are supposed to do, stand behind their sons, even when they don't fully understand their decisions. But slowly, something started to shift. Ethan called me less, visited rarely, and when he did, Lydia's influence was clear. He spoke her words more than his own. If I suggested something, she had already told him otherwise. If I tried to share advice, Ethan would brush it aside. I'll never forget one evening, just a year before the betrayal. Ethan and I were sitting on the porch of the villa, the sun setting over the lake. I turned to him and said, "Son, this place, I built it for you, for your family. One day, when I'm gone, I want you to feel the same peace here that your mother and I felt." He gave me a small, distracted smile and said, "Dad, times are different now. Lydia thinks we might not even keep this place long term." It's a lot to manage. Those words stung more than he knew. I didn't argue, though. I just nodded and said, "Well, I hope you remember that this villa has more than money invested in it. It has memories." Looking back, that conversation was the first warning sign. Ethan no longer saw the villa as a symbol of our family. To him, it was property. To Lydia, it was an opportunity. And to her parents, Charles and Margaret, it was a prize. Still, I never thought my son would one day turn to me and say, I wasn't welcome there. I never thought the boy who once held my hand as we walked through that half-built house would stand on the finished porch and tell me it was no longer mine. But before that day came, life at the villa was quiet. I woke up early, drank my coffee on the deck overlooking the water, and sometimes spent afternoons fixing little things around the house, an old habit from my construction days. I was content, or at least I told myself I was. I believed, foolishly, that the bond between a father and a son was stronger than anything. I didn't know then that betrayal was already brewing. I didn't know that the home I cherished would soon become the center of the deepest wound my heart would ever feel. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything came crashing down. The sky was gray, the kind of heavy clouded sky that makes you feel like something bad is about to happen. I had just finished polishing the oak banister inside the villa, a habit of mine ever since Emily passed away. I'd run the rag over the wood and remember the day she said, "Henry, this is more than a staircase. It's the heart of this home." I smiled at the memory, not knowing what was about to unfold. Ethan called me into the living room. He wasn't alone. Lydia sat next to him, her arms crossed, her expression sharp, as if she were bracing for a fight. My son, though, he wouldn't even look me in the eye at first. That's how I knew something was wrong. "Dad," Ethan began, his voice low but firm, "we need to talk." I set the rag down and leaned against the doorway. "All right, son. What's on your mind?" Lydia cleared her throat before he could continue. "Henry, this villa is a lot. It's too much for you to handle at your age. You're here all alone, and it's not fair. Ethan and I have been talking, and we've decided it would be best if my parents moved in here. They need the space, and they can take care of it properly." Her words sliced through me, but I stayed quiet, my eyes fixed on Ethan. "Is this what you think too, son?" I asked softly. Finally, he looked at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and determination. "Dad, it's for the best. Lydia's parents need this place more than you do. You'll be fine. We'll help you find somewhere smaller, more manageable. But this villa, it's theirs now, and you're not allowed to come back once they move in." The silence that followed was deafening. My ears rang as if the house itself had gasped at his words. I stared at him, my own son, and for a moment I felt like the ground beneath me had given way. "Not allowed?" I repeated slowly, the words foreign in my mouth. "You're telling me I can't come into my own home?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but didn't back down. "Dad, you have to understand. You've had your time here. It's just a house. What matters is that you're taken care of, and we'll make sure of that. But this isn't yours anymore." Lydia leaned forward, her voice crisp. "Henry, don't make this harder than it needs to be. They'll be moving in next week. You should start packing." I looked at her, then back at Ethan. My heart felt like it was breaking into pieces, but on the outside, I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. "Ethan," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "do you remember the day your mother and I brought you here for the first time? You were 9 years old. You ran through every room, shouting that it was the biggest house you'd ever seen. You told me you felt like a king in his castle." For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but it vanished quickly as Lydia placed a hand on his arm, anchoring him back to her side. "That was a long time ago, Dad," he said firmly. "Things change." I felt something inside me snap, not in anger but in clarity. I realized in that moment that my son was gone, at least the boy I once knew. In his place stood a man who had chosen his wife's family over his own, father, and there was nothing I could do to change that. So I smiled. Not a smile of happiness, but one of quiet resolve. "All right, son," I said, nodding slowly, "if that's what you think is best." Lydia's lips curved upward in a satisfied grin. She thought I had surrendered. She thought I was weak, defeated. Ethan looked relieved, as though a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. But inside, I was anything but defeated. That night, as I sat alone in the villa, I replayed the conversation in my head. The sting of Ethan's words, the smugness in Lydia's eyes, the silence of the walls that had once held my family's laughter. Every detail burned into me. And as I stared out at the lake, the water dark under the cloudy sky, I made myself a promise. If they wanted my villa, they could have it, but not the way they thought. I would let them walk right into the surprise of their lives. After Ethan and Lydia left that afternoon, the villa felt colder than it ever had before. I sat in the living room long after their car pulled away, staring at the empty chair where my wife, Emily, used to sit. Her absence weighed heavier than usual. I imagined what she would say if she had been alive to witness what our son had done. Emily had always been the gentle one, the peacekeeper, but she had a sharp wisdom about her. I could almost hear her whispering, "Henry, don't fight fire with fire. But don't let them walk over you either." That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for my home. I wasn't going to raise my voice or get lawyers involved in a bitter fight. No, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, on the surface. But beneath that, I would make sure they learned a lesson they would carry for the rest of their lives. The first step was removing the things that truly mattered. I walked through every room of the villa, taking my time, touching every piece of furniture, every framed photograph, every tool and keepsake. Each item carried a story. The rocking chair Emily had rocked Ethan in when he was a baby, the dining table where we had shared countless family dinners, the set of tools I had inherited from my father. I carefully packed these into boxes and moved them into storage. It wasn't the villa itself I cared about anymore. It was the memories inside it. The walls could be taken, the floors walked on by strangers, but my life, our family's legacy, was in those belongings. The next step required a bit more planning. I knew the law and I knew property. I had built homes, bought land, and navigated contracts for decades. Ethan didn't. Neither did Lydia or her parents. They assumed, perhaps because I was older and quieter, that I had simply handed the villa over. What they didn't realize was that the deed had never changed. The villa was still mine, legally and rightfully, and I wasn't about to give it away to people who saw it as nothing more than a prize. I called an old friend, Mark Jennings, who had been a real estate lawyer for over 30 years. Mark was a man I trusted. We'd built our careers side by side, me with my construction company, him with his legal practice. When I explained what had happened, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then Mark said, "Henry, you don't deserve this. But if you're ready to make a move, I'll help you. What do you have in mind?" I smiled faintly. "I'm thinking of selling the villa, Mark. But not to just anyone. To someone who will put it to use. Someone who'll make it mean something again." We discussed the logistics for nearly an hour. Mark assured me it could be done quickly, discreetly, and in a way that would make Ethan and Lydia's little scheme collapse before it even began. By the end of the call, I felt lighter, not happy, but resolved. The following days were a blur of quiet preparation. I avoided Ethan's calls, what few there were, and didn't mention a word to him about my plans. Instead, I busied myself with arrangements. Movers came by under the cover of early mornings, and by the end of the week the villa looked bare. The echoes of footsteps grew louder without the furniture to absorb the sound. To anyone else, it looked like I was leaving in defeat. But I knew the truth. I was clearing the stage for the final act. One evening, my neighbor and longtime friend Tom stopped by. He had seen the movers and was concerned. "Henry," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "What's going on?" "I heard some talk from Lydia's folks. They're telling people the villa's theirs now." I chuckled softly. "Let them talk. They'll find out soon enough." Tom frowned. "You're really just going to let them take it?" I looked him in the eye and smiled, though there was steel in my voice. "I'm not letting them take anything, Tom. I'm just letting them walk into a surprise. They think I'm broken, but I'm not. I'm just patient." Tom studied me for a moment, then shook his head with a half grin. "You always did have a way of turning the tables, Henry. I'll stay out of your way, but I'll be here if you need me." That night I sat on the porch watching the moonlight ripple across the lake. The villa was quiet, stripped of its memories, its walls bare. But I didn't feel empty. For the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I felt something powerful. Control. The pieces were in place. The deed was secure. The villa's future was no longer in Ethan's hands, nor Lydia's nor her parents'. It was in mine. And I was ready to show them that sometimes silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence is the sound of a storm gathering strength. The morning Lydia's family arrived to move in, the sky was brilliantly clear. The sun sparkled across the lake as if nothing in the world could go wrong. But inside me a storm of anticipation raged. I had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see the looks on their faces when they realized the truth. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A shiny SUV pulled up first, and out stepped Charles and Margaret, Lydia's parents. Charles looked around with a wide grin, hands on his hips, as though he already owned the place. Margaret clutched her handbag like a queen, inspecting her new castle. A few moments later, Ethan and Lydia pulled in behind them. Ethan's face was tight with determination, but Lydia was practically glowing with triumph. She looked at the villa like a conqueror surveying spoils of war. I stood by the gate, calm as ever, my hands folded behind my back. "Morning," I greeted them politely. Margaret gave me a tight smile. "Morning, Henry. We're ready to get started. Movers are on their way." I nodded, still smiling. "Of course." "Everything's ready." They all walked past me toward the front door, chatting about where they'd put the furniture, how they'd redecorate, what parties they'd host. I followed behind silently, letting their words hang in the air like smoke. When Ethan reached for the door, his brow furrowed. He paused, pulling on the handle, then frowned. The door opened, but inside, instead of a warm, furnished home, they were greeted by the sound of footsteps and voices. A team of movers was inside, carrying boxes and rolling furniture dollies toward the door. "Hey," Charles barked. "What's going on here?" One of the movers glanced up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We're finishing up, sir." Need to clear everything before the new owners finalize the inspection. Lydia spun toward me, her eyes narrowing. "What is this?" I walked slowly up the steps, my face calm, my voice steady. "Oh, I thought Ethan told you. The villa isn't yours. It never was. The deed has always been in my name. And last week, I sold it." For a moment, silence. Utter silence. Their mouths hung open as the weight of my words sank in. "You sold it?" Ethan's voice cracked with disbelief. "Yes," I said, looking directly at my son. "I sold it to a foundation that helps struggling single parents. This villa is going to become a shelter, a place for people who truly need it, a place where children will laugh again, and where families can start over." Margaret's face turned red. "You can't do that. We were told." "You were told what Ethan and Lydia wanted you to believe," I interrupted firmly, "but belief doesn't make it true. I never signed over the deed. You were making plans for a house that was never yours." Lydia stepped forward, her voice sharp and venomous. "This is insane, Henry. You can't just throw away something like this out of spite." I looked her in the eye, and for the first time, I let a hint of my anger show. "Spite? No, Lydia, this is about respect. Respect for a home that meant everything to my wife, to me, and once upon a time to Ethan, too. You thought you could take it, parade your family in, here, and erase me. But I won't let my life's work be reduced to greed." Ethan's face twisted with conflict. He looked from me to Lydia, then back to the empty rooms behind the movers. "Dad, how could you do this?" I stepped closer, my voice lowering, filled with the weight of years of fatherhood. "How could I, son?" "No, the question is how could you? You stood here in this very room and told me I wasn't welcome in the house I built. You let greed and pride speak louder than family. You turned your back on me. That's something I'll never forget." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he looked small. Not the man who had declared my exile, but the boy who had once run through these halls with laughter in his voice. Lydia grabbed his arm. "We're leaving," she snapped, her pride cracking under the humiliation. "This is ridiculous." Charles and Margaret followed quickly, their faces pale, their earlier smugness gone. The whole group retreated down the steps, their footsteps quick and angry. I stayed where I was, watching them go, the movers continuing their work behind me. My heart was heavy, but not broken. I had lost a son in many ways, but I had kept something more important. My dignity, my integrity, and the memory of Emily that no one could ever steal. I turned back to the villa one last time. The walls were bare, but I didn't feel empty. Instead, I felt peace. The villa was no longer just mine. Soon it would echo with new voices, new laughter. Families who had known hardship would find hope here. That, I realized, was the true legacy Emily and I would have wanted. As I stepped outside into the sunlight, I allowed myself a final smile. They had come to take everything from me. Instead, I had given it away, on my own terms. And that was a gift they would never forget. After they left that day, the driveway was eerily silent. No more chatter, no smug voices making plans for my home. Oh, just the sound of the wind off the lake and the distant cry of a bird circling above. For the first time in weeks, I felt something settle deep inside me. Not victory exactly, because how can a father feel victorious over his son? But peace. The movers finished clearing out the last of the furniture by nightfall. I walked slowly through each room one final time. The walls echoed with emptiness, but as I touched the cool wood of the banister or looked through the tall windows, I no longer felt despair. I thought of Emily. I thought of her soft smile the first time she walked through the villa, how she had said it was more than a house. It was our story, and I realized she had been right all along. Our story wasn't ending here, it was changing. By the following week, the foundation I had partnered with took official ownership. The villa would soon be filled with families who had nowhere else to go. Single mothers struggling to make ends meet, fathers working 2 jobs to give their children a chance, kids who had never known the warmth of a real home. For them, this villa wouldn't be a trophy, it would be salvation. News spread quickly through town. Some neighbors stopped by to shake my hand, telling me it was a noble thing to do. Tom, my old friend, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Henry, you might have just pulled off the greatest revenge I've ever seen, kindness." I chuckled, but deep down it wasn't revenge that had guided me. It was the refusal to let bitterness consume me. But Ethan, my son, he didn't come back after that day, not a call, not a message. I knew Lydia had a hold on him, and maybe he was too ashamed to face me. Maybe he was angry, maybe confused, maybe both. I don't know. As much as his betrayal cut me, I still loved him. A father doesn't stop loving his child, no matter how deep the wound. But I also knew something had shifted forever. Trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. One evening, about 2 weeks after everything, I found myself sitting on the porch of my small rental cabin just a few miles from the villa. The lake stretched out before me, golden in the sunset. I thought about Ethan, about how we used to fish together from this very shoreline when he was a boy. I whispered into the fading light, "Son, I hope one day you'll understand why I did this. I hope one day you'll see it wasn't about taking from you, but about giving meaning to what you tried to throw away." I don't know if he'll ever understand, but I do know this. I chose dignity over anger. I chose purpose over pride. And in doing so, I found a strange kind of freedom. What I learned from all this is simple, but it carries weight. Family should be built on respect and loyalty, not control or entitlement. A house isn't just bricks and wood. It's the life and love that fills it. And when someone tries to strip that away from you, you can either let them win by breaking your spirit, or you can rise above and show them that your worth doesn't come from walls or possessions. It comes from the choices you make when you're tested. I didn't scream at Ethan. I didn't fight him in court. I didn't let anger turn me bitter. Instead, I turned what could have been my greatest loss into something meaningful. To anyone listening, I want you to remember this. You don't always control what people do to you, but you always control how you respond. Sometimes the most powerful answer is not to fight for what others try to steal, but to give it away in a way that robs them of their victory and strengthens your soul. That villa no longer belongs to me. But every time I drive past it and see the lights on, hear the laughter of children spilling out into the yard, I feel Emily beside me. I feel proud, because in the end I didn't lose my home, I transformed it. And as for Ethan, well, he may have lost his way, but I'll always hold out hope that one day he'll knock on my door, ready to talk. Until then, I carry no hatred, only the memory of a painful lesson and the peace that comes with letting go. So yes, my son told me I was no longer allowed in my own home. And yes, I smiled and nodded. But when the moment came, I gave them a surprise they'll never forget. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I refused to let their greed define me. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. And that's my story. A story of betrayal, loss, but also strength. My son may have tried to take away my home, but he could never take away my dignity or my choice to turn pain into purpose. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, anger, sadness, or even hope, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Leave me a comment below because your perspective matters. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to give it a like. It helps more people hear stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear about rising above betrayal and finding strength in unexpected ways, share this video with them. Finally, if you want to hear more real stories filled with emotion, life lessons, and surprises that keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next story I share with you. Thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay kind, and remember, your dignity is worth more than anything someone can take from you.